Welcome to CompTIA IT Fundamentals Plus, another video in this series for the ITF certification. In this occasion, we are going to um, talk about, we're going to discuss using in device interfaces. This is Module 3, Unit 2. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to distinguish peripheral, graphics, and networking interfaces and their uses. You should also be able to install and configure input devices. Let's first start by taking a look at some computer and connector types. So we have, in the previous unit, I talked about the motherboard, and I explained that there are a lot of components inside the motherboard, inside the case of the computer, but also the way you connect to outside devices, to peripheral devices, is through these connectors over here. Um, First of all, let's talk about the HDMI. HDMI is basically for video. There are a lot of video and sound. It's kind of like the standard de facto lately for for video, and it's very common, very popular. You can connect a number of devices. So if you have a if you want to connect, for example, a computer to your TV, if the TV has an HDMI and a computer has it, then you can use basically the TV as the monitor, for example. There's a number of devices. So almost any computer device and television comes with HDMI. If it doesn't have HDMI, that means it's too old. I don't even want to see it, right? Another connector type that it's still used a lot is the DVI. Dell uses and HP uses that a lot. So that's another connector that you're going to see in some computers. This motherboard has also some SATA connectors here in the back to connect, like hard drives and stuff like that. Not very popular for connecting external devices because the more popular interface for this kind of thing is USB. So USB is extremely, there are different speeds. There was the original USB 1, USB 2, USB 3. And again, so a lot of devices like webcams and hard drives and a whole bunch of devices connect through USB. We have already talked about the network port, which is this connector called the RJ45, basically, which is this one over here, and that's where you would connect your network if you have a wired network. In most companies, the wired network it's the standard. It's more popular. It has a lot of features. You cannot use, let's say, wireless on a server. So most servers use wire. So wired is the kind of the standard connection in a corporate environment. Now at home, you may have a combination. You may have a desktop that connects to your cable modem, and then you have other devices such as tablets and laptops that connect through Wi-Fi, wireless network, which we will talk later. And then here you have a whole bunch of audio devices depending on the type that your device uses. But so these are some kind of like the most common components that you would find on either a desktop or a laptop, depending on the laptop. Some laptops come with some of this device, not as many as a desktop. So as I said, the USB or the Universal Serial Bus is a plug-and-play interface basically meaning that if you buy any USB device, whether that is a camera or a printer or an external hard drive, you connect to the computer detects, and most of the time you don't have to do anything. There may be cases, especially with printers and scanners, in which you may have to download the drivers from the manufacturer. But for the most part, Windows 10 specifically comes with tons of device drivers, and you don't have to do anything. As I said, there are different versions and data rates, such as the original, which was like 1.1, 12 Mbps, the version 2, which was 480 Mbps, and so forth. The latest version is version 3.1, which is up to like 10 gigabps. And again, it's very, very fast. So one of the questions you might get is, a user has two USB drives connected to her PC. She complains that when she copies large files to both drives at the same time, it seems to take much longer. Why might this be? Well, the first thing is that even though you have several USB connectors, they all use the same bus. And therefore, they share that bandwidth. So if you connect multiple devices and you do a lot of the stuff like copying, a large file from your hard drive to your USB drive, then they may become slow. And over time, sometimes, you connect USB devices and they do not work properly. Just reboot your PC, because over time, if you leave your computer on for a long time and you do a lot of stuff in the USB, they tend to become very slow. True or false, USB cables have the same connector at either end? Not quite. So most USB devices have one connector type that goes to the PC, and then one connector type that goes to the device. And there are different, shape and sizes when it comes to that. Okay. Firewire is another connector type that is kind of similar to USB, but it was not widely adopted on PCs. Came a long time ago, but to be honest with you, I have never used any Wi-Fi device, because USB came on and USB basically took on the PC world. The data rate for, it's like 400 Mbps. Again, USB 3 is much faster than that. It's a 6-pin and on power 4-pin connectors. But not to worry about this, because again, almost like nobody uses that anyway. All right, now let's talk about graphics devices. Basically the graphic cards that go in your computer that allows you to set the resolution in your computer, right? So the better the graphic card, the greater the resolution, the better that you can see stuff on your computer, especially when you have, high resolution images and stuff that you need to look at details. Video card or graphics adapter generates the signal to send to a display device or the monitor. So basically the display card works in conjunction. This is where you connect your monitor. Most motherboards have integrated adapters, as we have seen that, and we'll look at that later on. High performance adapters can be fitted through an expansion card. Now, again, as I have said before, a lot of most PCs, especially home PCs, even business PC, they already come with a built-in video port, so you don't have to worry about a card anymore. Video card often has its own CPU or the GPU for the graphics processing unit and memory, especially the most powerful video cards. If you are into graphics and design and like gamings and stuff like that, you probably want one of those. Resolution and color depth depends on the video card. VGA, which is the original old standard, it's a video graphics array standard. The standard, Ford column 3 versus the widescreen resolution, which is the 16 column 10 resolution, which is that one over there. High definition, HD, and the 4K resolution, all of that depends on your video card. So if you want to watch, 4K videos and movies and stuff like in a computer, then you need to have a good video card. And again, so if we take a look at a computer, if you right click on it and you go to the display settings, so in the display settings, this is what I'm talking about. This is the resolution that I'm talking about. This resolution here will depend, this resolution over here will depend on your graphic card. So obviously, the higher the resolution, the better the your monitor will display. And that's the recommended in my case. So my monitor supports 1920 by 1080, which is not bad. But I have a lot of other resolutions that I could play with. So again, if you want to look at the display resolution on your computer, that's how you would do that. And you're able to see what your computer support over there. All right. All right, so going back to our slide, let's now talk about, let's have a quick question. So you want to purchase a flat panel monitor that can show widescreen movies. You are considering models with native resolution of 1400 by 1050 and then 1920 by 1200. Which should you choose? And the answer is you should choose this because that's the native. This is the resolution that actually support widescreen. So that's what you gotta get. So if you're buying a monitor, so find out what kind of resolution it supports. High definition multimedia interface, HDMI. We have already talked a little bit about this. It's very widely used on computers and consumer electronics, televisions and DVD players and that kind of stuff, your cable modem. Sufficient bandwidth for HD resolution and 4K. There is a mini and the micro connectors also available. DisplayPort and Thunderbolt are other type of connectors that are kind of the competitor technology to HDMI. Other manufacturers like HP and Apple came with those things. They're still around in some computers, but HDMI took the world. And again, so if you're gonna buy a computer, make sure that it has HDMI. If you buy a used computer, you may come home and you have an HDMI cable already, and then you come with this weird connector. You go, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't fit there. Well, it means that it's not HDMI. It kind of looked like it, but the inside looks like it, but inside is completely different. So, and the same thing with Thunderbolt. So again, old technology and proprietary kind of. Apple uses some of this in HP. I would not, like to use those if I don't have to. But again, so it depends on your on whatever you have, whatever you get. The digital visual interface or DVI, this is preceded HDMI as the principal display interface for PCs. So basically this was, first than HDMI. DVI can support both digital and analog monitors. Single and dual link version, most interfaces are DVI-I dual link. They're kind of bulky, and again, it's still kind of a lot of computers, Dell, they still come with this. So it's important to at least recognize, when you see a connector, it's important to recognize what type it is. Because if you have this on a computer, obviously you need this connector on your other device and your monitor to be able to put it in there. So they have to match. So you cannot obviously connect, a DVI to HDMI and vice versa. So again, HDMI is backward compatible with DVI-D using a suitable adapter cable. In other words, so there are converter cables out there. So you could buy a DVI-D connector to HDMI and so forth. So if you go to Amazon, if you have one of those weird connectors and you have a cable and it won't fit, you may have to buy a converter adapter to be able to use that. True or false? HDMI is the only type of display interface that supports high definition picture resolutions. And no, it's false. We just talked about that. So there is also the display port and Thunderbolt, and also some DVI formats also support the HDMI resolutions. The original old video graphics array, or VGA, it's a blue 15-pin port. It's basically a legacy analog interface. So if you have an old monitor, this is yeah, similar to like those old CRT bulky TV kind of. So some flat panel displays and graphic adapter continue to provide this for backward compatibility. So you'll see that a lot of monitors come with either this and HDMI. So if you have an old cable, you can still use that. A lot of computers still come with this video port. So you are considering buying a new display device. The model that you are considering accepts digital inputs only. Your computer graphics adapter has a blue port with 15 holes. Would this flat panel be a wise purchase? Probably not, right? Because as we just said, this connector is VGA, which supports analog output only. There's no digital here. And yes, it is possible to buy connectors to convert from a VGA to HDMI. Input devices, the human interface device, or HID. So basically, this is the kind of device that we use to interact, to communicate with our computers, right? Obviously, the most commons are the keyboard and the mouse. This is the original legacy old type of mouse. It's called the PS2 port. Even though the PS2 ports in a mouse, in a keyboard, they are identical, and you could basically connect interchangeably the mouse on the keyboard and the keyboard on the mouse, but they will not work. That's why at the beginning they were the same color, and people made a lot of mistakes because if you connect the keyboard where the mouse goes, it wouldn't work. So what they started doing was that they colored these things, and now the mouse is generally the green one, and the keyboard is the kind of like the purple one over there. All right, but again, old stuff. So most I would say that the most mouse and keyboards nowadays use the I should stop this. All right, so most mouse and keyboard nowadays use USB connector. So, and yes, you can connect, they're exactly the same. So you could move it around. You can connect the keyboard there and then move it around and put the, it doesn't matter. It's not like this that they are specifically for the mouse or the keyboard. Yep, the keyboard is divided into sections. It has the function keys, the tab and the caps, shift keys, then the numeric keypad, and pretty sure that you guys are familiar with all that stuff. All right, true or false? Mice and keyboards must be connected to a computer via PS2 ports. And nope, as we just said, they can be connected. Most of the time, actually, they use the USB instead of the PS2 ports nowadays. All right. All right. So here again, it's a kind of like the back of the keyboard. This is a really old power port. This is where you would connect the printer. Again, mouse and keyboard, then a serial port. Again, very, very old. You won't see this anymore on computers. You have an Ethernet port, USB, the traditional VGA port right here. which is this one. Oops, let me get one of these. And then you have the DVI port over there and all the sound for your microphones and subwoofer and that kind of stuff. So, you know, very nice layout of the keyboard, of the back of the PC right there. What type of mouse would you recommend for someone who uses their computer principally to play computer games and what? Well, actually anybody. A laser mouse, these are the almost all mice nowadays are laser anyway. So they're more accurate, more precise. So I would not buy one of those all with the little ball here in the bottom. So laser mice are the way to go. Input devices, laptop keyboards and touchpads. You know, like the iPad and Android. Samsung has some nice ones too. FN switch for laptop keys, the touchpad gesture support. You could also buy a stylus pen, you know, if you're going to be a lot of writing and drawings and that kind of stuff. How do we configure a mouse? Okay, so again, we just talked about that you connect the mouse through either a PS2, that's very old, or the USB, that's the most popular, and obviously wireless, it's the way to go. So, and that's what, you know, it's annoying to use a wired mouse, and that's, you know, so wireless is the way to go. And that's what basically almost nowadays what most people use. But again, you go to a lot of companies, you see this traditional wired mice. Install the vendor driver. Most mice, unless it's something really sophisticated with a lot of features, you don't need to install the drivers from the vendor. Although when you install the drivers from the vendor, you may get additional functionality. But most mice, you just connect them, especially in Windows 10, and it'll work. Now, how do you configure that? So in Windows 10, if you just type in mouse, you're gonna get to the mouse settings app. And basically, this is how you would go in and configure the mouse. There's some more, you know, additional advanced options, but you know, unless you really, there's not much to do over here. The only thing is that you can change whether you want the, you know, the primary button to be the left or the right, depending, you know, what kind of person you are. Roll the mouse wheel to scroll. So if you every mice has like a little scroll wheel, and then you can control how you do that over there. You can choose how many lines to scroll each time, and also you can turn on and off the scroll in activity and that, you know, kind of stuff. So again, if you want to play around with your mouse, this is where you go. In Windows 10, you just type in mouse and there you go. If you have a Windows 7 computer, then basically, you know, Windows 7, you go to Control Panel, and remember that if you the first time you go to Windows, if you haven't configured this, it's going to be in this category view, which I prefer to use the icons. So if you change the icons then you can go to here is the keyboard and here is the mouse. And then, you know, you can change the buttons. Again, you can switch from left to right. You can change the speed of the cursor and, you know, the click lock. If you want to look at pointers, this is the default, but there are also all the pointers over here that you play with. Be careful because you can mess the mouse completely up and make it unusable. But if that happens, you come over here, just use the default and kind of try to go back to the way it was. There's some more pointer options over here in terms of like motion and visibilities and stuff like that. If you have problem with your sight, then you can configure some things here. You could also configure the wheel and the type of scrolling, whether, you know, vertical or horizontal. Again, so I never play around with this thing. The way that it comes out of the box is good for me. But if somebody's having trouble with the mouse pointer or using the mouse, then basically that's where you would go to change that stuff. Keyboard, kind of like the same thing. Connect to an appropriate port. Most again are either the USB or wireless keyboard. Also configured using the mouse applet. Set the correct, actually the keyboard applet. Set the correct region layout using the settings. Switch between multiple layouts using notification. You can use the that shortcut over there. But again, so in Windows 10, if you just type in keyboard, then you can go to the keyboard applet, or you can go to the typing settings. There's a whole bunch of things that again that you can do to the keyboard, especially when it comes to the character repeat and the rate repeat and that kind of stuff. Here you'll see what kind of keyboard you have installed and all that stuff. When it comes to the language, again, in Windows 10, if you just type in language, and then you go to the language settings, let's take a look at a couple of things in here. So in the language settings, actually, let's all right, so this is stuff to change, especially depending on the region. So if you are a out of the United States, for example, in Europe, they use a different format for the date and the numbers and stuff like that. This is where you would type that over there. So if you let's say type a certain key on the keyboard and something that completely different comes out, then it could be that you use in another version. Like for example, in UK, the layout of the keyboard is different than in the United States. So if you work for a multinational company, then this should be a place that you can come in to change the settings and the layout. All right. So again, in Windows 7, if you go to, so again, control panel again. And for those who do not have control panel on the desktop, you can click on the start button and then you can go to control panel from here. But so there is the keyboard here, okay, which is similar to just by looking at the keyboard. But the regions and language settings in Windows 7, it's right here, okay? And then the keyboards and language, it's right here where you can change the stuff. That's if you have multiple languages, because a lot of people, especially people that work in multinational companies and they travel. So if you're working with someone, there's an office in UK, the person may have different layouts depending on what kind of keyboard they're using. So this is where you would do that. So right now we only have the US keyboard, but you can add more keyboard. The same thing if you go to a different language. If you want to type in the keyboard in Spanish, for example, it's completely different than the keyboard in English. The keys are different, right? So if you're going to work in Spanish with an operating system in Spanish, then you need to change that to a Spanish keyboard. All right, those are the kind of things that you need to understand here. So a friend is asking for your help in using her computer. When he presses the key mark at, a different symbol appears. What could be the cause? And again, the keyboard is set to use a UK layout. And you can correct this by using the language bar that I just showed you. Same thing, configuring the pen and styles. In Windows 10, actually, if you go to device settings and stuff, device printers and cameras, and so if you come here to devices, there's tons of things. You can work with Bluetooth devices here. You can add, you can remove. This is a PC, and I don't have a Bluetooth. This computer doesn't have Bluetooth built in. I could buy a USB Bluetooth and put it on, but mostly on laptops and tablets and stuff like that, you work with Bluetooth. And again, on this page over here, when you go to device settings, there's a whole bunch of things. So you can work with Bluetooth devices, printers and scanners, The mouse is over here. Typing, there's a lot of stuff that you can change depending on how you type. Um, if you have some kind of like a pen and Windows ink, so if you have a tablet that uses pen and ink, then kind of like the stylus type that we were talking about, this is what you would do that. So especially if you have a tablet, like one of those Surface devices that comes with Windows 10. There's a whole bunch of things here that you can configure, right? USB devices. For example, it says notify me if there are issues connecting to a USB device. So if you connect a USB device and for whatever reason there is a problem with, you're going to get a little pop-up thing saying that there is a problem with that. If you connect your phone, for example, or your USB drive, you're going to get it, autoplay basically means that it will pop up and say, hey, we found some folders here. How do you want to handle this? And that kind of stuff. So you can configure all that kind of stuff in here. And again, as we move along in other units, we're going to go deeper into this. At this point is just be able to know where to find these things. So you need to configure settings for an input device. What should be your first step? You open the settings app or the control panel, or you just search for it. Remember that in Windows 10, the best thing is to just search for things instead of trying to memorize where things are. Bluetooth, personal area networks, PAN. So a lot of devices like headsets and wireless speakers and stuff like that, they use this kind of thing. It's a wireless communications enables short range connections to peripheral and networks. Pretty sure most of you are familiar with this. Bluetooth is up to 10 meters, even though the latest version maybe go a little bit further than that. But again, you start losing connection when that happens. So you have the 3 Mbps, which is the Bluetooth EDR, kind of like the old standard. The latest one is, up to like 24 Mbps using HS and Wi-Fi. A lot of the wireless cam also use this. There are also tons of, with this IoT things, Bluetooth devices are very popular. Again, if you're gonna configure Bluetooth devices, again, you can either type in just Bluetooth on Windows 10, start typing, and then it's gonna get you to the same place again. And this is where you would do that. There's tons of stuff about Bluetooth. Obviously, you just click on add, and you say what kind of a Bluetooth device is it that you want to look, and it says that it can connect because I don't have a Bluetooth chip on this computer. But if I had Bluetooth, then it would start looking for devices. And then if I have a device such as a phone or speakers or a camera, then it would basically find it and connect. And you may have to type in a code and that kind of stuff. But anyway, so this is where you manipulate, where you manage Bluetooth devices. So basically you plug it into discoverable mode, you go over there and it'll be found by Windows or iOS or whatever it is that you're using, pair using a passkey on both the devices. So if you have a device, it'll comes and tell, hey, the passkey is either 1234 or 000, and that kind of stuff. It is important, especially for security purposes, that when you are traveling around with your phone or any Bluetooth device, disable the Bluetooth device, because there's way to kind of hijack devices and hack them while Bluetooth is on. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the security units, security modules. RF, and the near field communications devices, NFSC. They're very popular nowadays, especially with the paying devices. You can use your certain cards, your phone. You can use you add your credit card to your phone, and there are devices where you just kind of get the phone near the device, and your payment it's all set. So I've used that actually very frequently. So radio frequency ID or RFID. passive tags, typically encoded with data, respond when scanned by an RFID reader. They are very popular in manufacturers widely, for inventory management. The near field communications, NFC, it's a peer-to-peer version of the RFID working at very close range, especially that's what it said, you can add your credit card to your iPhone or your Android device, and you can pay in many places with that. Yeah, so it's using smartphones for contactless payment. Actually, now that because of the COVID-19, it would be actually a good idea to use this type of technology so you don't have to touch any surface. Networking interface. So we talked a little bit about that. We talked about this is a wire card, but there are also wireless cards. And so it's a NIC. This is RJ45. We also talked about that. Now in the computer, so if you look at this, this is my the program that would interact with this device, right? So this is my network. It says I'm connected. This is a desktop, and I'm connected through my wire. But if you right click on this, and then you click on Open Network and Internet Settings, we're going to be talking a lot about this in the networking piece of this class. But so here it is. This is what, this is my network status. It says that this is the name of my network. It's a private network. And yes, I'm connected to the internet. If for whatever reason I was not connected, then I were not connected, it would tell me right here. So this is the status. There you can see that if we go to Ethernet, which is the kind of the protocol that this uses, and again, we'll talk about that later. If I want to see the adapter, the software piece, then you click on this, and this is my adapter. So these are all the things because I have virtualization, so ignore all that stuff over there. But this is my network adapter, the physical adapter, and this is the how I interact with that. So if I right click on it, I can disable it. Obviously, if I disable, I lose my internet connection. I will disconnect it from you because I lose all of my connection. But if I click on a status, I can see the status of this connection. IPv4, again, we'll talk about IPv4, IPv6. It says that it's enabled. This is the how long has been connected. So that means that I have not rebooted my computer for 15 days. This is how much data is sending and receiving. And again, I could go to the properties, I could disable, I could, if you click on diagnose, if you have an issue, it will disable it and then you'll lose connection. So be careful when that you really meant to do that. So again, bridge connection, we'll talk about some of those things, in the networking component. But so if you go over here and you right click on it, that's how you interact with, your network. Telephone connector. This is a very old technology, almost like nobody uses this anymore. But the telephone connector is an RJ11, and it's just similar to the RJ45 that is used for networking. It's also used between the digital subscriber line or DSL, internet modems, and the telephone jack. But again, it's not as commonly used as the RJ45. All right, so basically, what do we cover? We'd cover distinguishing between peripheral graphics, networking, interfaces, and their uses, installing, configure input devices, and did some configuration for the keyboard, the mouse, and that kind of stuff. So there is a lab on the book, which is configuring input devices. If you don't have a physical device, at least just go through the lab, read it, and if you have any questions, then we'll cover that in class. Okay, so this is it for now. I will see you in the next video.